A lot of people have been paying premium prices for tools that don't actually give them premium results, not because they needed pro-grade gear, but because they assumed cheaper alternatives couldn't do the job. That assumption costs real money. In this video, we're fixing that. You'll see 10 Harbor freight tools that replace more expensive DeWALT options for normal home, garage, and weekend work. For each one, I'll show you the exact DeWALT tool it competes with, and why the cheaper option is enough for most people. Let's start with a tool where overpaying is almost automatic and completely unnecessary. Tool 10. Pittsburgh Pro 1/2-inch breaker bar. A breaker bar is one of the simplest tools in a garage, which is exactly why it gets overpaid for. There's no motor, no gearing, and no precision mechanism doing work behind the scenes. The only thing that matters is leverage and strength. The Pittsburgh Pro breaker bar from Harbor Freight is built around that reality. It's long enough to generate serious torque, made from solid steel, and uses a basic pivoting head that holds up under pressure. When you're dealing with stuck lug nuts, suspension bolts, or rusted fasteners, that's all the tool is required to do. The more expensive DeWALT breaker bar doesn't change the outcome of those jobs. Once steel thickness and bar length reach a usable threshold, torque comes from your body weight, not from branding or finish quality. In real-world garage use, both tools apply the same force to the fastener. Where this matters is expectation versus function. People assume higher price means higher capability, but in this category, there's no extra performance to unlock. The job either breaks loose or it doesn't, and both bars rely on the same physics to make that happen. As long as the head is tight, the bar doesn't flex, and the length gives you leverage without needing extensions, the work gets done. That's the bar this tool clears, and why paying more here usually doesn't make sense. The next tool is where people start assuming cheaper options fail faster, but that assumption doesn't hold up either. Tool 9. Bauer 20V Brushless Impact Driver. Impact drivers are one of the most overassumed tools in a garage. People expect a massive performance gap between premium brands and cheaper options, even when the jobs themselves don't justify that gap. The Bauer 20V brushless impact driver is designed around the reality of homeowner and weekend use. Most impact driver work involves driving wood screws, lag bolts, self-drilling fasteners, and hardware into framing, decking, or sheet goods. In those situations, consistent torque and trigger control matter far more than peak numbers on a spec sheet. Brushless is the key detail here. Once you remove brushes from the motor, efficiency jumps. The tool runs cooler, batteries last longer per charge, and torque delivery stays predictable through the job. That's the same core advantage DeWALT markets heavily Bauer, just brings it at a lower entry cost. When people compare this to DeWALT's more expensive impact drivers, they often imagine dramatic differences in speed or strength. In real use, those differences are minor, unless you're working at volume. Driving a few hundred fasteners in a day doesn't stress the Bauer in a way that exposes weaknesses. It sinks screws cleanly, doesn't stall under normal loads, and stays compact enough to work in cabinets and tight framing bays. Where DeWALT pulls ahead is longevity under abuse, not output. Daily trade use, constant drops, dust exposure, and non-stop duty cycles are what premium pricing protects against. If your impact driver lives in a garage, comes out for projects, and gets stored properly afterward, you're not accessing the extra durability you paid for. Another hidden cost difference is the battery ecosystem. DeWALT pricing reflects long-term platform investment, multiple tool lines, contractor support, and compatibility across dozens of tools. Bauer narrows that focus. You're paying for the tool to do its job now, not for a decade-long fleet strategy. For most people, the performance ceiling arrives much earlier than expected. Once an impact driver reliably drives fasteners without overheating, stripping heads, or draining batteries too quickly, additional cost stops translating into better results. That's where the Bauer lands, past the usefulness threshold, without the brand premium. This makes it a strong example of how modern brushless tools have flattened the playing field. The assumption that cheaper means underpowered doesn't hold the way it used to. Next up is where buying sets feels convenient, but often means paying more for pieces you don't actually use. Tool 8. Quinn Master Socket Set. Socket sets are where people quietly overspend the most, not because they need higher performance, but because they buy brand reputation bundled with a lot of pieces they'll rarely touch. The Quinn Master Socket sets from Harbor. Freight are built around coverage, not prestige. You're getting both SAE and metric deep and shallow sockets, laid out in a way that actually reflects how people work on cars, equipment, and home projects. That matters more than the name stamped on the chrome. When you compare this to DeWALT's large mechanic socket sets, the gap isn't strength or usability, it's positioning. DeWALT prices their sets assuming professional environments, where tools are abused, loaned out, dropped, and used daily. For most people, sockets get used occasionally, cleaned rarely, and stored carefully. Under those conditions, the performance difference is negligible. Sockets don't generate power. They don't cut, spin, or measure. Their only job is to fit fasteners correctly and not round them off. Once tolerances are acceptable and the chrome holds up, the work result is the same. A bolt either comes loose or it doesn't. The Quinn sets clear that bar. The sockets fit properly, the markings are readable, and the trays keep everything organized so you're not hunting for sizes mid-job. That last part matters more than people realize. Organization saves more time than marginal durability gains. Where cost inflates on premium sets is branding, polish, and the assumption of long-term commercial abuse. If you're not working out of a truck or a shop, you're paying for durability you won't fully use. The Quinn set focuses on completeness and accessibility instead. Another overlooked factor is replacement logic. Losing one socket from a premium set hurts. With Quinn, replacing a missing size doesn't feel like a financial penalty. It's a practical decision. That alone changes how the tool gets used. For home mechanics and DIYers, this is one of those categories where utility tops out early. Once you have the sizes you need in a layout you can find quickly, spending more doesn't improve outcomes. It just increases sunk cost. The next tool is where big-ticket pricing makes people assume precision, but accuracy doesn't always scale with cost. Tool 7. Hercules 12-inch dual-bevel miter saw. Miter saws are where price and perception get tightly linked. Bigger motor, bigger brand, higher price. The assumption is that accuracy automatically follows. The Hercules 12-inch dual-bevel sliding miter saw is built to handle the kinds of cuts most people actually make. Trim, framing lumber, decking, shelving, and basic angle work. Straight cuts, repeatable miters, and clean bevels matter far more here than raw motor branding. In practice, cut quality on a miter saw comes down to three things: fence alignment, rail rigidity, and blade quality. Once those are handled, the motor's job is simply to maintain blade speed through common materials. For typical home and renovation work, the Hercules motor does that without hesitation. When compared to more expensive DeWALT 12-inch miter saws, the difference shows up less in accuracy and more in refinement. DeWALT tools are tuned for daily job site, movement, constant recalibration, and long-term abuse. That matters if the saw is being loaded into trucks, knocked out of square, and run all day. If the saw lives in a garage or shop and gets dialed in once, the advantage shrinks quickly. Once the fence is square and the rails are smooth, both saws produce straight, repeatable cuts. Wood doesn't know what brand cut it. Another cost driver is portability. DeWALT charges for lighter materials, compact designs, and ecosystem compatibility with job site stands. The Hercules leans into stability instead, more mass, solid rails, and fewer compromises for transport. For stationary use, that's not a downside. Blade choice matters more than most people expect. Swap in a quality finish blade, and the gap between saws narrows even further. Tear out, smoothness, and accuracy improve immediately, regardless of the logo on the housing. For people building decks, finishing rooms, or doing weekend projects, this is a classic case where setup quality and blade selection matter more than the brand premium. Once those boxes are checked, the cut result is the same. The next tool is smaller, simpler, and often overlooked, but it's another category where price doesn't buy better results. Tool 6. Icon Professional Screwdriver Set. Screwdrivers are one of those tools people assume don't matter until they strip a fastener or their hand hurts halfway through a job. That's usually when they reach for a more expensive brand, assuming price equals control. The Icon Professional Screwdrivers focus on the parts that actually affect performance: tip fit, shaft rigidity, and handle shape. When a screwdriver fits properly, it transfers force cleanly into the fastener instead of slipping, camming out, or rounding edges. That's what prevents stripped screws, not branding. compared to DeWALT's higher-priced screwdriver sets. The real difference isn't capability. Both are hardened steel. Both are designed for hand torque. Where Icon closes the gap is in tip geometry and handle ergonomics. The tips seat securely, and the handles give you enough grip to apply pressure without over-squeezing. For most home and garage work electrical plates, hardware installs, appliance repairs, automotive interiors, you're not exceeding the torque limits of either tool. Once the tip fits and the shaft doesn't flex, performance plateaus. Extra money doesn't make the screw turn more cleanly. Another overlooked factor is wear. Screwdrivers are consumable tools over time. Tips wear down, especially if they're used on stubborn or poorly sized fasteners. When that happens, replacing a single Icon screwdriver doesn't feel like a financial setback. That changes how the tool gets used. You're more willing to retire worn tips instead of forcing them and damaging screws. Handle comfort also matters more over time than people expect. If a screwdriver is uncomfortable, it gets avoided, which leads to using the wrong tool for the job. The Icon handles are shaped to fill the hand without hot spots, which matters during longer tasks. In this category, once steel quality and fit are good enough, paying more mostly buys brand consistency and polish. For typical use, the work result is the same. Screws go in clean, come out clean, and hands don't hate you afterward. The next tool is where vibration, not power, decides whether the cheaper option holds up. Tool 5, Bauer 5-inch Random Orbit Sander. Random orbit sanders are a comfort test more than a power test. Almost any modern sander can remove material. The real question is how controllable it feels, how evenly it sands, and how fatigued your hands are after 10 or 20 minutes. The Bauer 5-inch Random Orbit Sander is designed around typical home and shop sanding furniture prep, drywall patches, refinishing surfaces, and smoothing edges. In those jobs, consistency matters more than raw aggressiveness. You want even scratch patterns, predictable removal, and a tool that doesn't fight you. When compared to more expensive DeWALT Random Orbit Sanders, the difference isn't whether the job gets done. It's refinement under long, continuous use. DeWalt's higher-end models are tuned to reduce vibration during all-day sanding on job sites. That matters if sanding is your primary task, day after day. For most users, sanding happens in bursts. A few minutes here, a tabletop there, some trim cleanup before paint. In those conditions, the Bauer keeps up. The orbit pattern is consistent. Pad movement stays stable, and material removal is controlled rather than jumpy. The finished surface is determined more by sandpaper quality than by the logo on the tool. Dust control is another area where expectations inflate cost. Neither tool eliminates dust without a proper vacuum setup. With decent disc and a basic dust bag or hose, the Bauer captures enough debris to keep the work area manageable for home use. Vibration is where people expect the cheaper tool to fall apart, but short to moderate sessions, the difference is minor. As long as the pad stays balanced and the housing doesn't transmit excessive buzz, comfort stays acceptable. The Bauer clears that bar for non-commercial workloads. This is one of those tools where paying more mainly buys endurance, not better results. If you're sanding for hours every day, premium refinement matters. If you're sanding as part of broader projects, the outcome on the wood or surface looks the same. Quick note, if this kind of side-by-side explanation helps you make better buying decisions, that's exactly what the rest of this video is built around. Next up is a tool where accuracy sounds expensive, but doesn't need to be. Tool 4, Icon Click-Type Torque Wrench. Torque wrenches are where people assume price equals precision. Digital displays, extra buttons, and brand reputation make it feel like accuracy must be expensive. In reality, the job requirement is much simpler. The Icon Click-Type Torque Wrench is built for controlled, tightening lug nuts, engine components, suspension hardware, and fasteners where over or under tightening actually matters. The click mechanism provides a clear, physical signal when the set torque is reached. That's the core function, and it doesn't need electronics to work well. When compared to more expensive DeWALT torque wrenches, especially digital models, the difference is not outcome, it's interface. Digital torque wrenches add readouts, memory, and alerts, but the bolt doesn't care how the signal was delivered. It only cares that the correct torque was applied. For most users, click-type torque wrenches are easier to trust. You set the value, pull smoothly, feel the click, and stop. There's no battery to die, no screen to misread, and no recalibration anxiety tied to electronics. Mechanical systems are predictable, especially when used occasionally and stored properly. Accuracy also gets misunderstood here, once a torque wrench is within an acceptable tolerance. Range and icon wrenches are designed to meet that range for typical automotive and mechanical tasks. Spending more doesn't make the fastener more correct. It just adds features around the same result. Another practical advantage is mindset. People are more willing to use a torque wrench when it feels straightforward. Digital tools sometimes get skipped because it's a hassle, which defeats the entire point. A simple click wrench encourages correct use instead of avoidance. In this category, cost inflation comes from added complexity, not added necessity. If you're not logging torque values daily or working under inspection requirements, the mechanical solution does the job cleanly and reliably. The next tool is large, heavy, and usually bought for peace of mind, but size and stability matter more than brand here. Tool 3, Pittsburgh 3-ton hydraulic floor jack. Floor jacks are one of those tools people buy just in case, and then assume heavier branding equals safer lifting. In practice, what keeps a car stable in the air has more to do with capacity, footprint, and hydraulic reliability than the name on the side. The Pittsburgh 3-ton hydraulic floor jack is designed for real garage use: sedans, SUVs, light trucks, and crossovers. 3 tons of rated capacity gives you margin, not just minimum coverage, which matters more than marketing claims. The saddle height, lift range, and wide stance do the actual work here. When compared to more expensive DeWALT branded garage jacks, the functional outcome doesn't change. The vehicle lifts, stays planted, and comes down smoothly. There's no precision advantage to paying more once the jack meets basic engineering requirements: stable base, reliable hydraulics, and sufficient capacity. Most home users aren't racing to shave seconds off lift time or rolling jacks across commercial shop floors all day. The jack comes out, the car goes up, jack stands go in, and the work begins. In that workflow, the Pittsburgh does exactly what's required without cutting corners. Weight actually works in its favor. Heavier jacks feel more stable under load, especially on concrete. While portability matters for professionals moving equipment constantly, a garage jack benefits from mass it resists shifting and feels planted once positioned. Maintenance is also simpler than people expect. Occasional hydraulic checks and proper storage keep these jacks working for years. There's no electronic failure point, no smart system to reset, just straightforward mechanical operation. In this category, peace of mind comes from proper use, not premium branding. Correct placement, rated capacity, and jack stands do far more for safety than a higher price tag. The next tool is where cutting power gets all the attention, but real performance shows up in how cleanly the cut finishes. Tool 2, Hercules 20 Phi, brushless circular saw. Circular saws are where people expect the biggest performance gap, because cutting feels like it should expose weakness fast. More power, higher price, better results. That's the assumption. The Hercules 25 brushless circular saw is built for the kind of cutting most people actually do: plywood sheets, framing lumber, pressure-treated boards, and basic rip and cross cuts. In those materials, what matters most is blade speed under load, straight tracking, and depth consistency, not brand pedigree. Brushless motors are the equalizer here. Once you have efficient power delivery, the saw's ability to maintain RPM through common cuts levels out quickly. The Hercules holds blade speed well enough that it doesn't bog down in normal framing or sheet goods. Cuts stay predictable, and the saw doesn't fight you through the material. When compared to more expensive DeWALT cordless circular saws, the difference shows up primarily in edge cases. DeWALT tools are built to survive constant job site abuse, long continuous cuts, and professional workflows where downtime costs money. If you're cutting all day, every day, that refinement matters. For typical home projects, the work pattern is very different. Cuts are intermittent, materials vary, the saw gets set down, adjusted, and picked back up. In that environment, the Hercules delivers the same cut results. The wood doesn't cut straighter because the tool costs more. It cuts straighter because the shoe is square and the blade is good. Blade choice is the quiet factor here. Swap in a quality blade. and the cut quality jumps immediately, regardless of brand. Tear out, smoothness, and control improve far more from blade upgrades than from paying for a higher-priced saw body. Battery economics also matter. DeWALT's pricing reflects deep platform investment and professional longevity. Hercules strips that down to cutting performance. If your saw isn't the backbone of a trade business, that cost difference doesn't translate into better results. In this category, capability arrives earlier than expected. Once a saw cuts cleanly, tracks straight, and maintains speed through common stock, extra money buys durability under punishment, not better cuts. The final tool is small, constantly used, and one of the easiest places to overpay without realizing it. Tool 1. Icon Professional Ratchet. Ratchets are one of the most used tools in any garage, which is exactly why people assume the expensive one must be better. More teeth, smoother feel, higher price. The expectation is that the difference shows up immediately. The Icon Professional Ratchets focus on the part of the job that actually matters: engagement in tight spaces. With a high tooth count, the ratchet needs less swing arc to move a fastener. That's what makes a difference when you're working around engine bays, suspension components, or cramped assemblies, where full rotations aren't possible. In real use, this is where the Icon closes the gap with far more expensive DeWALT ratchets. Once you have fine tooth engagement, solid internal gearing, and a head that doesn't bind under load, the fastener turns the same way. The bolt doesn't tighten more accurately because the ratchet cost more. It tightens because the tool engages consistently. The smoothness people associate with premium ratchets is mostly about backdrag and internal tolerances. The Icon delivers a low enough backdrag that it doesn't fight you when positioning fasteners by hand. That's the practical threshold. Beyond that point, improvements become feel-based, not outcome-based. Durability also gets overstated here. For non-commercial use, ratchets fail far less often than people expect. They're not consumables, and they're not under constant stress unless abused. With reasonable care, the Icon holds up just fine for home and garage work, without asking you to pay extra for professional fleet expectations. Another factor people don't think about is replacement mindset. When a ratchet feels too expensive, it gets babied or worse, avoided. Tools that feel approachable get used correctly. That leads to better habits, not worse results. This is the category where branding quietly inflates cost without improving the job. Once engagement is tight, motion is smooth enough, and the mechanism holds, the work result is locked in. Everything beyond that is preference, not performance. If this breakdown saved you from overpaying, like the video and subscribe. This channel is built around making smarter tool buys without wasting money.